This is a review of solving equations, both solving equations numerically and solving literal equations that have multiple variables. So I want you guys to do the do now, do 1 and 2, take 2 to 4 minutes, and pause the video and solve those two, and play once you're done. So for number 1, whenever we are solving equations, we're trying to solve for a variable, we want to simplify both sides first. So to simplify both sides first, what we need to think of is PEMDAS. And we're going to be using PEMDAS on both sides of the equation. So let's take a look. P stands for parentheses. I see one pair of parentheses, but there's nothing I can do inside those parentheses, so we don't do anything there. E stands for exponents. There are no exponents. M, multiplication. We do have multiplication here. We have the distributed property, so we're going to multiply 2.25 in with the 6x and the 12. So we're going to do 2.25 times 6. Put that in your calculator. Should get 13.5x minus 2.25 times 12. Once again, feel free to put that in your calculator. You should get 27 minus 27 equals negative 18 plus 19.5x plus 20. All right, so we just did multiplication. Is there any more multiplication? No. There's no division. Now we have the addition and subtraction, which is just for us. We're going to combine like terms on both sides. So on the left side, there's nothing to combine on the left side, so that stays 13.5x minus 27. On the right side, we can combine our constants. So negative 18 and 20 make 2. So the x stays there, 19.5x. And that would be plus 2. So we simplified each side of the equation. Now we want to get the x by itself in order to solve for it. So to get the x by itself, I always want to make my variable positive. I've seen it when people make their variable negative, or they don't care which side the variable goes on. If they have a negative coefficient, they sometimes forget to divide or multiply by that negative coefficient. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to subtract 13.5 on the left side and the right side equation, because that's going to make my variable my coefficient of my variable positive. And now I'm going to subtract 2 on both sides. That cancels out there, so we're left with negative 29 equals 6x. And now solve for x. We divide by 6 on both sides. Divide by 6. Divide by 6. You will get x equals negative 29 over 6. And you can always plug that in to check your answer. And number 2, we are solving for x here. So we want to get x by itself. What's the first thing I would do to get x by itself here? Subtract b on both sides. We don't know what y is. I don't know what b is. So that just stays y minus b equals mx. Divide both sides by m to solve for x and we do the inverse operation of multiplication, which is division. So we divide by m on both sides, and our final answer will be y minus b, all divided by m, equals x. So that's for the do now. Let's go on to the next question, which is, we got fractions here. So what value of x satisfies this equation? So take a couple minutes, solve this. So we have fractions here. It's all the same thing. It's all the same steps we're going to take. So we're going to multiply our 5 over 6 to distribute the 5 over 6 into both terms in the parentheses. So that would be 5 over 6x plus, now 5 over 6 times 9 over 20. We can just do that off to the side. 5 over 6 times 9 over 20. If you're doing this by hand, you can also put it in the calculator. That cancels out. The 5 and 20 cancel out to 1 and 4. This cancels out to 2 to 6, and the 9 cancels out to the 3. So it's just really 3 over 8 equals 36. Subtract 3 over 8 on both sides. You would get 5 over, excuse me on that. So you get 5 over 6x equals 35.625. And the last step, just multiply by 6 over 5 on both sides to get that x by itself. By 6 over 5 on both sides. That would get the x all by itself. So you would have x equal, and don't be afraid to put this in your calculator. And I want to show you guys how to do that, because there's a very good way to put fractions in your TI-84 if you don't know it already. So everyone get your calculator out. And so we're doing 35.625. And then in the calculator, you can just do times. And if you press alpha y equals, once again, it's alpha y equals, you get the number 1 stands for numerator over denominator, which is for a fraction. 2 is a mixed number, but we don't have a mixed number here. It's just 6 over 5 times 6 over 5. Enter. You get our answer, which is 42.75. And you can use that for this whole problem. Say you just want to do 5 over 6 times 9 over 20 in the calculator. You could have done that using the fractions. I think that makes it a lot easier, a lot less room for error. So that would be 42.75 would be our value. In putting fractions in your calculator, it always looks like this. It always has this sign right here, depending on your calculator. And how you would get to that, if you have the TI-84, which I know a lot of you do, you would first press alpha, and then you would go to y equals, and then you select number 1, which is n over d, which stands for numerator divided by denominator, and just make sure you press enter at the end. And that's how you get to that in TI-84. So how about the last 2 problems here? What about the one on the left and the one on the right? So 2x minus 15 equals 2x plus 15. How would I go about solving this? Well, we want to get our x by itself in order to solve the equation. So I'm going to subtract 2x on both sides. Get the x is all on one side. If you notice, that cancels here and here. It cancels all the variables out. So we're left with negative 15 equals 15. Which is simply not true. If you remember, whenever you have something that does, when you have a constant equal to another number that's not that number, so negative 15 does not equal 15. This is not true, so this means we have no solutions. That's the symbol. You can also say no solutions. And that happens every time we have a constant on one side and set it equal to another constant, which is not actually equal to, when you simplify an equation to that. And what if we solve the one on the right? You subtract 2x on both sides, and you get negative 15 equals negative 15. If you notice here, negative 15 does equal negative 15, so that means anything we plug in for x, it's going to simplify to a true equation. So this would be infinite solutions, or infinite solutions. So anything you plug in here is going to work for x, and at the previous one, anything you plug in for x is not going to make the equation true. So that's our cases of no solutions and infinite solutions once you get to them in the equation. Let's go to the next page. I want you guys, before you start these next two, I want you to take a look at how this first one's worded. It says solve the equation below 4x in terms of k. So we want to get x alone is what we're trying to do here. So x should be alone on one side of the equation, everything else on the other. Whenever it says like in terms of, that means that's not what we're solving for. That's what's going to be on the other side of the equation. We're solving for the actual variable that's mentioned, 4. And so I want you guys to do this one, and I want you to do the next one. Pause the video, take 2 to 5 minutes, and play it again once you're done. So first step here, simplify each side. Thinking PEMDAS, nothing to add inside the parentheses, no exponents. Nothing to simplify in the parentheses, I should say. So we're going to do our distributive property. That would be 8kx minus 72 minus 3kx equals 28 minus 13k. Now we just need to add and subtract. The right side's good. The left side, we have some common terms to add together, or in this case, subtract. So that would be 5kx minus 72 equals 28 minus 13k. Okay, so we want to get x by itself. There's only x on the left, so we're good so far, but we need to keep going. So we're going to add 72 on both sides. Add 72. That will give us 5kx on the left equals 100 minus 13k. We got one more step to solve for that x. That x is getting multiplied by 5 and k, so we're going to do the inverse operation and divide by 5k. Divide by 5k, and we would get our answer of x is equal to 100 minus 13k all over 5k. And that is our answer. You could simplify that further by doing 100 over 5k minus 13k over 5k and simplifying each of those fractions a little bit more. But you cannot, I see this mistake all the time, you cannot just say, oh, cancel out the k's here and it's 100 minus 13 over 5. That's not true because you need to divide each term in the denominator by 5k. If you do that, you're not dividing the 100 by k, which it needs to be divided by. So that would be our answer right there. And the equation for the volume of a cylinder is v equals pi r squared h. The positive value of r in terms of h and v is, so we want to solve for r here. That's what we're getting by itself. So I'm going to rewrite the equation. V equals pi r squared h. What's happening to r here? It's getting multiplied by pi and h. It's also getting squared, but you want to work farthest away from the r first. So the farthest away from the r, the square is being done directly with the r that's closest. You want to divide by the pi and h. So divide by the pi and h on both sides. You get v over pi h equals r squared. Last step here, we want to get the r by itself. We got to get that square out of there, and the opposite, the inverse operation of squaring is square root. That gets rid of the squaring, so we have the r all by itself, the radius, and that's going to equal the square root of v over pi h. And the last one. I want you guys to take a minute, pause the video, try this one. This one is the first step is the most important step in this equation. So our thought process, we're solving for x, so we have to get x alone. We don't want we can't have 2 x's on the left, we can't have 3 x's, we just want plain old x on the left. We want x to equal something. I don't know what that is yet. So if you look on the left, we have 2 x's written there. They are not like terms, so we can't just simply add them together because this has a y, this has a z, the y and the z here. So what we're going to want to do here, in order to write it with 1x, what could we do in order to just write 1x there? Factor out the x, because the x is a common factor in both terms. So when you factor out an x, you're going to have left with y plus 8z on the inside equals 20. And now it's important to see what that accomplishes now. So we now just have the x on the outside here. And what's happening with the x? It's getting multiplied by y plus 8z. So what could I do? What's the opposite of multiplying by y plus 8z? Well, it's dividing by y plus 8z. So I divide by y plus 8z on both sides. That gets this to cancel out. So now we're just left with the x on the left side. So x would equal 20 over y plus 8z. And that's our answer. So be careful of that. We're going to be seeing that factoring out of a variable a lot coming up. That's an important step to see when you're solving equations. So the classwork after this is just more about solving equations. And that's it for this review lesson.